Welcome to the Curious Hope Podcast. My name is Pastor JD Croft. I am here at Blue Mountain Community Church, and joining me today is Pastor Channing Marvin.
Hey, JD. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on the podcast, Channing.
Yeah.
So today we are starting a new series. We just wrapped up our series on Christian catchphrases last week with Pastor Nate. Had an awesome start, an awesome run there with Pastor Nate. But these next few weeks, we're starting a new series called Outside the Bubble. So my idea for this series sort of came from basketball. Do you watch basketball, Pastor Channing?
I enjoy watching basketball. I don't really stay up to date on all the players and teams and stuff.
Yeah, that's fine. Anyways, the NBA this year, once COVID hit, they had a bubble. They called it, like the NBA bubble where no one could go in and out. It was like this protective barrier. And I was thinking to myself that because of COVID, it was sort of like a symbol for what's happening with all of us, that I know for myself at least, and we're going to talk about this and get into this here in a second. We've put around these bubbles, sort of these barriers around ourselves because of COVID.
Totally.
It's just so easy to do. And so we're going to be talking about what it means and what it looks like to live outside of our bubble, to live outside of our comfort zones, to be aware of that. So yeah, we really appreciate having you on here, Pastor Channing.
Yeah.
So I want to start off by asking you, how has the adjustment after COVID hit, what did that look like for you? More of a personal question. What did that adjustment sort of look like? Did you put up walls? Did you put up a bubble? How did it affect your daily routine?
Totally. I think a lot of people are in the same stage of, at the beginning, my wife and I, we were working from home. My wife is a school teacher, so obviously school shut down, and we thought it was only going to be like 3 weeks. We're like, there's no way that they're going to be closed for the rest of the school year. But yeah, it turned into 6-7 months now, and they just opened back up. But yeah, so we were both working from home. Everyone did not know what this virus was going to look like, and a lot of anxiety and fear over it. So yeah, we kind of stayed home, limited our exposure. We were wiping down all our groceries at first and soon realized maybe that's not needed. But so our social lives, our isolation from people definitely deterred us from our ministry life and from just interacting with friends and family. And yeah, I think a lot of people are in that same boat.
Yeah, halted. That's funny, wiping down the vegetables. I'm not making fun of you. I know we all have done similar things. Yeah. Halting those interactions. For myself, it was really similar. I was in New Jersey at the time once it hit, finishing up seminary. But once COVID hit, sort of the motivation to get outside of my wife and I's apartment and see people, and for good reason, because we didn't want to spread the virus. But even situations where we wouldn't have spread the virus, like it was harder for me to even get out and go for a walk. Right. As much as I wanted to do that because I felt so cooped up, it was hard. It was hard to get momentum, hard to get motivation outside of my nice little comfort zone where I had Netflix right here and I had, video games right there and a book right here. It definitely was. I know we put up, our walls and created this tiny, safe little bubble for ourselves where it was easy for us to think about us and only us. So I want that to sort of lead into, so you are the missions pastor here at Blue Mountain Community Church.
Worship and missions, yeah.
Worship and missions, yes, not just missions pastor, worship in missions. So sort of segueing into that word missions, it means that you're sort of focusing on others, or you would think outside, outside of your bubble, outside of what you normally would think about day to day. What do you think most people are aware of when they hear the word missions?
I think it definitely depends on the worldview that you're in, different cultures that you're in and stuff. I kind of took a deep dive into this, and the term mission, it comes from the Greek term or Latin verb missio, which means to send. I don't know if you're there yet in the show notes or not, but I think there's a lot of different connotations of the term missions, and it depends on your interaction, your cultural background, and the term. But yeah.
What do you mean by that? So you say how you perceive the word depends on your background. Can you give me like some examples?
So I think there's been a lot of religious hardships of a lot of in a lot of countries that the term mission means that people are coming in and forcefully changing your worldview, forcefully changing their terminology and their worldview, their religious aspects onto you. So I think a lot of people in the world has negative connotations of the term missions, that it's not just a conversation over coffee talking about religion and Christianity and stuff. I think a lot of people have had negative interactions with the missionaries in the past.
Because there's almost like a history
Totally.
behind it. So what for our listeners, because some might be aware of that history, some might not be. Can you talk a little bit about what the negative aspects of the history of missions, some examples of that? I know, to start off the bat, I've learned of certain situations in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, pretty much everywhere in the world, where it was, especially 200, 300, 400 years ago, where missions went hand in hand with empire. And so people would come and say, this is Jesus, learn all about him, or else we'll kill you.
Right.
Or learn about Jesus and destroy your idols, or else you're going to be enslaved. That kind of a deal. Is that sort of along the lines of what you're talking about?
I think so. I don't have too many areas where I've had specific stories of this, but this is kind of just what I've learned traveling around the world and stuff, and talking to our missionaries that we've traveled with. Just kind of like stay away from the term missionaries, especially we have some partners in Southeast Asia Pacific that it's a very Muslim culture, and a lot of people have very much of a negative connotation over the term mission. So I had to try very carefully of not like out them. They're doing great work there, and it's not like it's illegal, but it could definitely raise some red flags for the ministry that they're doing there. So I had to be very careful of. I think that was a big learning experience for me. Yeah,
so that's hard. How do you, so you said to not use the word missions. Do you think that we should start using different words or try to reclaim the word missions? Because that's something, as I was thinking about our conversation today, this word has a lot of baggage and a lot of history to it. Yeah. What do we do? Do we shy away from it? Because your title is still the worship and missions pastor. I know that for a fact because we're coworkers. Yeah. Do you think we should be shying away from this word and starting to use different words, or do you think we should reclaim it, or are you not sure?
I'm not sure about that. I've kind of gone a couple different ways. I think biblically, and I think we're going to get to that in a second too, but like biblically, missions is a biblical term, and God is a missional God. But I think a lot of people have different perspectives of even like short-term mission trips. The what people think of when they think of a mission trip is different than what I'm wanting to go as a church. So I'm also, I think I wanted to change my title to outreach pastor. I feel like the term outreach people understand more, and that as a church we're reaching out to those beyond our walls, beyond maybe different, who think differently than us, that that we just want to pour out to them. So I'm not sure. I think I'm kind of getting away from the term missions. I've been trying to figure out a different way to call like our short-term trips.
Yeah, it's something it sounds like we're still wrestling with because don't know what, and that's okay because it's hard to put ourselves in the shoes of other people who if we haven't had a negative experience with it, but it's important to do that.
And it definitely seems one-sided.
Yeah,
so
it does.
Mission is like there's one person being sent to proclaim the gospel or whatever. Your mission doesn't have to be Christianity or religion, but they're being sent to change a perspective to someone else is what kind of I grew up understanding. Yeah, and I feel like it should definitely not be that way.
There's a patronizing aspect to it, and it makes you think of what's the Crusades, right? Mm-hmm. That's the missions. You think of the guys with the knights with the shiny armor with the crosses on their shields, and they're engaged in missions. It's funny. So let's talk a little bit about. We can call it outreach for the rest of this conversation if you want. Some of the outreach. Because it sounds like we have misconceptions about missions, or we're still learning how to frame it, how to think about it. What are some misconceptions that some of our listeners and that we might have? Because I know I have a lot of misconceptions about people in other countries because I haven't been to every other country in the world. But what are some stories that you might have, if you feel comfortable sharing a story about a misconception that you might have had that changed, when you traveled abroad? Because I know that you've traveled abroad and met different people. And I want to, right before you share your story, though, as you're thinking about it, I want to share this statistic I found. 40% of Americans have never been outside of the country. So it's not like you can't necessarily blame people, for not knowing how to think outside of the bubble. Because if you've never been outside of your bubble, as far as the country is concerned, cultures are different, and it's really difficult to adjust, to learn, to understand them. Talk about an experience you've had trying to understand another culture.
Yeah, so I've been blessed, and I've been definitely lucky to have traveled so much that I have growing up, and I feel like my worldview and just experiences started young. So, and I know a lot of people, 40% of Americans have not traveled outside of the country. But I think a big thing that plays into it is our media and the negative media that it brings, that other countries are dangerous, that there's a lot of other things happening, and I think that builds stereotypes with the misconceptions. And one thing, I was actually pretty nervous. A couple years ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Indonesia, which it's a Muslim country, and especially after 9/11, there's a lot of fear and anxiety that went into that the media played into Muslims, and I think our country has a big misconception of who Muslims are. But yeah, I was kind of nervous. I was looking forward to visiting one of our partners there, and they're doing great work. But yeah, my misconception was totally flipped. They're the most hospitable, loving people that I've ever met. That I found a lot more similarities to our faiths than I was realizing. And it was an experience that I was not expecting. I was expecting to be on edge the whole time. I don't know. I had imagery in my head of like a lot of violence or physical dilemmas or anything. But man, it was life-changing for me. And that just goes to show that until you meet and actually interact with people of different cultures, or even if you have a stigma against someone else, until you actually sit down and know their story and know their background, and to start with similarities of what brings us together, I think it totally changes that.
Yeah, and that's awesome, because it sounds like you thought, not that you were trying to be patronized, but like, yeah, I'm going to go into the mission field and going to go, evangelize and talk to these other people who are so different than I am. But it sounds like you found a lot of similarities and a lot of goodwill amongst these other people. So one thing that I know that contributes to this stigma, and you and I have talked about this before, is when some of the language that we use when we talk about people from other countries, a lot of it has negative connotations. So something we've talked about before is the word third world country, which is still in, constant use, where we're talking about, we're going to go to, when we talk about the third world countries, we're talking about specific countries. Some background on the term. The term third world country was originally, and I had to look this up. I obviously didn't know this off the top of my head. Yeah, I saw it in show
notes. Like, I didn't know where it originated from.
So it came from a French demographer named Albert Salvi. And so this was during the Cold War. So during the Cold War, the first world countries were, the U.S. and the U.S.'s allies. The second world countries was the USSR. And then the third world countries were the countries that were still developing.
Okay.
And that's how the division went back then, but it's definitely a dated term. So I sort of know where you stand on this. Why do you think using words like third world country or underdeveloped country, how can that harm, not just be patronizing or insulting to people in other countries, but how can that be bad for us using words like that?
Well, yeah, just starting with that, if you're going to somewhere saying, oh, it's a third world country. Yeah, I didn't know that background. It's really interesting. It's just really old terminology, and having a misconception of how they're living. And I feel like people, when they go to visit other countries, or just thinking of other countries, you just picture everyone in shacks, and they don't have access to water, that they're just in this different life stage than realistically they probably are. I read a book a couple years ago called Factfulness. It's by Hans Rollings. And it just totally changed my worldview and perspective of a lot of this stuff. And I'm going to quote some of it from the book.
And for our listeners too, I'll make sure to put the link to this book in the description. So
it says today most countries have migrated from the developing box to the developed box, and that 85% of humanity now has fewer children and low mortality rates. So that's what this book kind of based on whether it's undeveloped or not, is mortality and fertility rate. So, and it's just a misconception that a lot of, I feel like probably in our Western minds, probably like 40% of other countries are underdeveloped or a third world country, when in fact that, sorry, I was looking at my notes here.
You're good.
That we're not really caught up, that it's an outdated perception, and it divides the wealthy West with the impoverished third world states. And the majority today, this blew my mind, the majority of humans today live in middle income countries. And I feel like that's another thing that media plays into, that it's the rich Westerners, and then there's a lot of low income countries that there's not a lot of in between. But a lot of us share a lot of the same life stories, a lot of the same ways that we do life, because a lot of the majority of humans are middle income countries. So that it's just a great book that, it really changed my perspective and really made me sit down and think of like, what is an underdeveloped and third world country to me? Because I've always just used that terminology because that's what I grew up using too.
And that's it's really important to know that, hey, look, our conception of other countries is messed up. Most of these other countries, there's so much, the life stories of the people that we'll meet from other countries is so much more similar than we might think at first glance. But it's so easy, like you said, the media plays a lot into it too. Like, when you watch those commercials that are asking for money, and they'll show the
oh man, I know where you're going.
you know where I'm going with this, right? Like, they'll show the most graphic, rundown places of other countries, because that prompts us to. I think that they use that. I'm psychoanalyzing here, but it prompts us to give because we feel like we can, like the missions we were talking about earlier. We can go save someone. It's like where we can go and we can save those people that are those poor people that have so much rough going on, but it's really patronizing. So I want to sort of shift gears here. That conception that we have of people in other country that they're all extremely poor, when that's not necessarily the case. I think that bleeds into how we do outreach also. Okay. So I want to talk about short-term missions a little bit too. Short-term missions, when we go to other countries, we have a bad tendency as Americans, and those in the West that are listening to this, we have a bad tendency of equating physical riches with spiritual riches. So I know that when we go on short-term mission trips, most often the people that are preaching, say we're partnering with the church somewhere else. Why is it that we expect, so this is just what I'm familiar with in the short-term mission trips I'm familiar with, the people from the U.S. that are going somewhere else are the ones that expect to be asked to preach. They expect to be the ones to put on the VBS show, to add the spiritual depth. When in reality, God's working just as much, most likely more so in that community than he is there in the West. And we're going to talk about this in, I think, next episode or the episode after that, sort of the shift of Christianity center. So we're not going to dive too much into that today. But what do you think about that equating, physical poverty with spiritual poverty, and that assumption that you sort of had that, you're going into the Indonesia, right? Where you're going in, these people must be sort of spiritually poor and they're going to be mean and rough. But in all actuality, we actually, as Americans, might have even more to learn from them than teach. So what are your thoughts on that?
I always joke that I always have to have a sermon prepared because most likely they ask last minute for the pastor, whoever's leading the trip, if they're able to. So I always have something prepared. And but I don't know what it is. I think they're interested and learning about our culture and what we have to say about the gospel, because I think it's different a lot of times than, I mean, what they're learning from the gospel. I think it's so interesting when people read biblical text in different cultures and around the world that they get something totally different out of the scripture than what I would get. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of times it's not healthy that we go in with that expectation
I feel like it's the expectation. Yeah, that's
I don't know
we
why.
expect to be the ones that are going to share. I just know that it's so hard, and I myself am guilty of this too, to go on a missions trip and expect to like pour out, to do outreach, instead of be filled up by our brothers and sisters in Christ that are overseas, that have a new viewpoint. Like, we go expecting to teach and not to learn.
Yeah.
What?
And I think it has to do with like the terminology. And when I take trips, I have some trainings that I go through, and I really teach of what we're expecting, what we're going into, how we can learn so much more about their culture than us. Because a lot of times I grew up understanding that mission trip is one-sided, that we go with a goal and mission to share the gospel, to share our viewpoints in life with these people. And a lot of times, talking to people, every time I've gone on a trip, I always come back more filled and have a better understanding of how God's working in my life. And I feel like I'm always filled up way more than the people that we went to visit. And I think that's so backwards. I think we should come in with the mindset of learning of their perspective, how God's moving in their country and their lives, and come alongside those people. I've created a goal that we only travel to places with our partners and mostly where we're invited, and that we're able to come alongside what their ministry is doing alongside of their local church, and how can we bring our resources, how can we bring some things and aspects to further their ministry that God's already working in their lives.
And I think that's so important, is seeing it as a partnership. Because like you said, you might be asked to speak a sermon, and that's okay. It's okay to share our witness and how God is working in our church or in the U.S. or in our community. But we have to know and have that expectation that God is working in their community just as much as he's working in our community. And to, like you said, to come alongside. It's a partnership. So we have just as much to learn from them as they do from us also.
Yeah, I think we really need to get away from the mindset. I think we need to find a more healthy common ground of how it's more of an experience of experiencing the global church, and breaking walls of the misconceptions and stereotypes, and how the global church, how God is working through the global church, and how we're able to go and visit places and be open to learning more about their culture and how and have it more two-sided. I think it starts with the conversation like we're doing,
And here's some statistics. So if you're listening at home and you're like, yeah, you guys are saying that, but where's the proof to back it up that God is working in the lives of Christians and communities overseas more than he is here? So this is from a Pew Research study. Percent of the population who attend weekly worship. The USA, 36%. And so this caveat, this doesn't mean God's working more or less, but like you said, we tend to think of people in other countries as, we need to bring the gospel to them. They don't have, God there. Completely wrong. It's actually flipped. In the U.S., 36% of people attend weekly worship services. Mexico, it's 45%. Nigeria, it's 89%. Ethiopia, it's 82%. Pakistan, 59%. Indonesia, 72%. All of those, and I can keep listing off countries, way more than the United States as far as people who weekly attend worship services. The percent of Christians who say religion is very important in their lives, and this is from the same 2017 Pew Research study. In the USA, 68% of Christians say that their religion is very important in their lives. Colombian Christians, 80% say it's very important for their lives. Ghanaian Christians, Ghana, 89%. Honduras, 94%. So we can look at the cold hard facts that people in the world are on fire for Jesus. And their communities are more involved in church. They're more involved in religion. They're more involved in that kind of thing than we in the U.S. are. So we got to be humble. We got to be, when we do outreach and partnerships, like you said, we got to be willing to partner alongside them and learn. So, Pastor Channing, I want to ask you, when we do these kinds of partnerships, when we do this kind of outreach, what are examples of outreach or partnerships done badly? What do we have to watch out for? Say we want to go on a outreach trip, or a missions trip. Say we want to go on one of those trips. We want to give our money to an organization that's helping out overseas. What do we look for? What should we watch out for?
Yeah, I think it's so easy to go in with good intentions, and it's a lot more harmful than it is helpful. But a lot of us don't realize how harmful it can be to the people we're visiting, or even doing mission work with. I think it has a lot to do with the mindset of the trip and going to share. Like, a lot of the intention is to go to share our lives rather than to have conversations and learn from each other. Over the years, just reading books and having a lot of my own personal experiences, a lot of ways that I have a lot of good intentions that feel that just ends up being more harmful is like a lot of building wells. There's been a lot of big pushes and initiatives to go and build wells for a lot of countries and places that don't have clean water. I think that's huge. I think that is really important, that clean water, starting with a healthy way of getting water, that it's proven that it runs into all the rest of like your education and mindset and your health. But a lot of times we go and build the wells and then leave. We don't go and teach them how to maintain the wells or bring alongside people to train and like how we're able to build these wells and maintain them after we're gone. So a lot of times people have built wells and then they go back like 5 years later and it's just run down. It's not working anymore. And they're like, what happened? It's because we go in, but we don't teach how we do things. So I think that's one example. And this other example is something that I've experienced a lot. I spent, between a 2-year period, I've spent 6 months living in Belize, leading some mission trips a couple of years ago. And I saw a lot of how we were doing ministry, how it was creating dependency, how that local church we were working with in Belize we were creating dependency for them to depend on the churches in America, because the whole summer was packed full of mission trips. Different youth groups, different churches throughout the U.S. and Canada were coming down and running the ministries for the church. And it was a lot of good intentions, and I saw a lot of their main goal was saving souls. And I think when you put a number on that, I think it's very important to go and share the gospel and share how God's been working in our lives and stuff. But a lot of that is harmful in the sense that, so going back to VBS, like you're talking about, a lot of the churches was doing very much ministry. So they'd come and run VBS. They'd go and do some different ways of reaching out to the community. And week after week, there's different teams that did the same exact thing. And so it was a bunch of Americans coming and leading the ministry, and then they left. They were creating relationships, long-lasting like memories for the people going down, but then they would leave and never have interactions with them again. So we need to be coming alongside the local church there and having them lead, and maybe we can bring some stories and ways that God's working in our lives.
Imagine being a kid in Belize and you go to VBS and you're singing the same songs that you have been every single day and hearing the same programs. That would be boring. That would be...
It wasn't... Yeah. The kids... They loved it. They loved Americans coming down. They had the time of their lives. But the problem is we built so much solid relationships in that week. And I saw this team after team. I was there for 3 months. And, when they left, they were heartbroken.
Yeah.
I think we need to find better boundaries for this. That I would love. It's so good for us to receive the benefit of understanding how the church is working and having some different views of life and stuff.
You can't learn from another church or another community if you're not alongside them for a long time.
Right.
It's like, I just thought of, it's like a relationship. Like if you meet someone that's super special and you fall in love instantly, right? But you're only with them for a week. You're not going to know that much about that person after a week. You're not going to, a lot of the richness of relationship and of partnership comes from those long-term relationships. So I love that you say that we need to find a different model where we can go on these short-term mission trips, but the places that we do that, we need to have relationships with those people and to continue our contact with them, learning from them, building that relationship, watching it grow. I think that's so important that you said that.
But over those summers, like the local church is not existent really there anymore.
Really?
Because we took all of the ministry out of the local church because that whole summers they're packed full with other people from outside of the country coming in and leading the ministries. So they had a lot of the local church was not involved in the community because there's other people coming in and taking care of that for them. But yeah, it's so important to have a longevity relationship that if we do something like that, at least point towards this is the local church, this is the pastor, this is the people, continue these conversations with them. But I think they need to be more interactive. We need to come alongside them.
So there's such a thing as being too involved and doing too much. And I also want to say this applies to outreach done abroad, but it also applies to outreach done at home. So I'm familiar with, and might step on some toes here, but there's a lot of outreach organizations. One particular that I was involved with in college in Chicago. I didn't go to college in Chicago, but I went on like a short-term trip there to do some learning, that hand out Christmas gifts to families during Christmas time. And a lot of these churches, they mean well. They 100% do, where they will stockpile a bunch of Christmas gifts for families that are in need. But, and this is what I learned from, there's an organization that was doing things differently in Chicago. And this was their rationale behind, I'll tell you what they did differently here in a second. But they said that is actually, in many cases, much more harmful than good. Because not only does it take the agency away from the breadwinner of the house. So like you were saying, all of those mission trips to Belize took the agency away sort of the church. So giving all these toys away, these toys and these gifts away, takes the agency of the parents away. So as a parent, you no longer get to give your child a present on Christmas. Yeah. It's these random people that are showing up on your doorstep that you don't know that give your child a toy for Christmas. And I can only imagine, say, I'm not a father, but if I was a father, there's so much joy in giving people presents. And if someone else is taking all that joy away from you during Christmas time, it would be hard to maintain that kind of dignity, of giving those presents away. So anyways, this organization was amazing. What they did is, instead of giving all of the toys away, they had a store, quote unquote store, where they heavily subsidized all of their Christmas items. And then they would have a shopping day where they would allow anyone from the community to come in and buy a TV that's like 95% off, whatever, a Barbie for 95% off. So they would heavily subsidize these toys. So these parents, and often these are single parents that are working incredibly hard, that, that parent then can give the toy to their kid, and that parent has the agency, they have the dignity, and the church is still doing that outreach. They're still helping out so much. It just sort of strips away the pride and the patronizing aspect of it, where we're the ones that gave the toys, us. It's we're helping this parent fulfill what they want, for their kid, and it builds, that family's relationship once more. Are there any other similar stories like that you can think of?
Yeah, and I love that too, because I've definitely been involved in things like that. I was a huge supporter of Operation Christmas Child growing up, and I loved being able to just understand that me buying this is going to someone else that really needs it, especially as a kid, and teaching that to your kids. But I'm not really supportive of that anymore because of a lot of the same reasons that you're just saying. I think there's an exception to these. The only exception to this type of charity is in emergency responses. I think that's the only exception. Yeah. Not for gift giving, but in this form of charity. But a lot of these, like Operation Christmas Child and other organizations like that, you're just saying, like locally and stuff, it really suppresses the local markets. It creates feelings of dependency, and it doesn't really address the systematic problems and empowerment of local leadership there. And it creates shame for the parents too. And and we go in not understanding the culture. I've heard a lot of lot of stories that we come into a church with all these gifts and we give it to the kids and expect them to open up, be joyful and stuff, and the kids love it, but in some of those cultures, they don't open gifts in front of people. Mm-hmm. So they're there with the gifts, but it's supposed to be more of a private exchange.
And imagine being the parent,
along the sidelines, just watching and being shamed because they weren't able to provide their child with a gift.
So it's almost like outreach done well is the kind of outreach where you can't necessarily take pride in it and get that feel-goody feeling like, oh, I did something so great, yay me. It sort of strips the pride and the pride aspect of it. Another specific example that comes to mind, I was talking with a gentleman, I believe, from Hope International, which is an organization. They were talking about how they were at this kind of outreach conference, and there was a table next to them. So this isn't Hope International that was doing this, but there was an outreach organization next to them, and I don't think that they shared the name. But this is after the Haiti earthquakes that happened, I think like 10 years ago. I'm not sure exactly when, but when a bunch of earthquakes and really damaged Haiti, there were...
2010,
2010, awesome. There was an organization that was collecting backpacks for all of the kids in Haiti. So they were collecting a bunch of backpacks, a bunch of school supplies, and they were going to go give them to them to help with the earthquake relief efforts. Mm. But then this guy that I was telling you said, I traveled to Haiti, and I was talking with several people. I was walking, along the road or talking with someone along the road, and I saw this completely abandoned building. I'm like, what's that? He's like, well, that's actually a backpack factory that's completely run out of business because the flood of the nonprofits, the flood of the gifts came in, and he's like, that backpack factory literally employed like 15, 16 people. And now that the earthquake happened, it was the worst thing for us because it literally drove all of these businesses out of business because you can't compete with free. It feels good for us, maybe in America, to, foot the bill. I'm going to send all of these backpacks to Haiti without realizing that there's repercussions for every quote unquote good deed, and so we need to make sure that we're not doing more harm than good.
Yeah, totally. And that's the same thing for a lot of clothing shops. I mean, we ship, even like, it's so sad, like after World Series or after like big playoff games and stuff, they usually have already two jerseys, two shirts of like the winning champion, and a lot of times the team that doesn't win, they already have all these shirts printed up and stuff. They ship it off to some countries in Africa, and so they have so much clothing being sent to these countries that there's a lot of entrepreneurs in those countries who are trying to stay alive and have some local clothing that they're making and stuff. But yeah, those businesses just plummet because there's a bunch of free clothing that's just coming into the country, and we think so. I think there's a balance that needs to happen there for sure, and
there needs to be an educated understanding of economics. So like here in Walla Walla, we are a medium-sized community, but if someone was to come in and bring like 10,000 free shirts, I guarantee you the local shirt stores here would not be happy. Oh, totally. They would do terrible. Yeah. So it's just a basic understanding of economics, of culture, like we talked about earlier today, of partnership, of relationships, of religion, that these people that we're partnering with, they have their viewpoints on God, and they can be just as on fire for God, if not more than we are. So it's a lot of it just comes down to that kind of awareness of culture, religion, economics, all of these kinds of deals. So Pastor Channing, as we're wrapping up today, I want to give you an opportunity to share an example of outreach done well. So I know that you have we have many partners here at Blue Mountain Community Church. We have Advent Conspiracy coming up. Can you share one example, and it's up to you, of one of our partners and how you've been intentional about partnering with these people, and why you think it's a good partnership, how we're trying to do it well?
Yeah. We recently just went through kind of re-strategizing our missions here and our partner support that we are engaged with. And a big ticket item was to have indigenous-led leadership in the country that we're supporting or anything like that, that the indigenous leadership is being upheld and that we're investing into those lives. I don't think it's healthy when a lot of Americans go and they're the faces and the leadership of like the whole initiatives that they're doing, but they're not building up the local leadership there. They're not coming alongside the indigenous leadership. We just started supporting Haiti Hospital. It's Mission Haiti Hospital. Forget what the local name for that hospital is, but one thing that I think they're doing tremendously well is that they have 60 some staff members that are all Haitian. That our only partnership with them is we're acting as insurance. So our financial support is subsidizing the patients who are coming in, that they're able to actually afford healthcare. The healthcare system there is just, it needs a lot of work and help. And their overall goal is to be a self-sustaining hospital, totally Haitian run. And I think that is, God is doing amazing things through them. We're able to offer support and prayer. These local nurses, doctors who understand the culture, understand what people are going through, and they're able to share the love of Christ through medicine and ways that they can come alongside those people who they're helping. And I think it's huge.
And so it sounds like that's an organization where the agency is still there because you said they're employing only Haitians. They're the ones in charge of making the decisions.
Yeah.
So if we're not helping them in the correct way, they can say, they can just say, nope, we don't need that right now. But
Yeah, totally.
that's what, if the agency is there, they're telling us, this is what we need you to underwrite this insurance for us. So that it maintains their agency, maintains their dignity. Like you said, the goal is self-supporting. But it sounds to me like that's just a complete partnership. It's not like we're going in telling people what to do. This is how we want to help. We're listening, saying how can we help you, maintaining agency, dignity, and trying to learn from them too. So that's awesome. So if our listeners want to get involved, how can they with this specific organization?
So in December, we have Advent Conspiracy. So getting out of the consumerism mindset and really investing in one of our partnerships. So this year, we are actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to release this yet, but we're working with the Haiti Hospital, and we're going to help just pour in some financial help and just really love on them and partner support. So, so we have that coming up.
So if you're listening to this, I'm sure that when this does start rolling in December, make sure that you're looking at our website, that you're looking at our social media pages, because it'll be the ways that we can help and get involved will be there, right, Channing?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So just if you're listening and that sounds like an organization that you'd like to partner alongside them with us, go ahead and look at Blue Mountain Community Church's Facebook page, website, and we can go ahead and work together on partnering just like that.
And if you're kind of like, if you want to have some more conversations and stuff, if you're like, man, I loved Operation Christmas Child and the things that they're doing, that's a huge part of my my family ritual every December and Christmas, I would really encourage you to kind of prayerfully consider and kind of look more into that. And a great alternative is one of our partners, Children of Promise. I love the ministry they're doing. They're coming alongside churches worldwide and helping children fight poverty. And so they have a big Christmas initiative coming up too. So that's a healthy way to get you and your family involved in helping children around the world. So I encourage you guys to check out Children of Promise too.
That's awesome. Yeah, and if you have more questions too, like you completely disagree with us and we might have said something wrong about an organization, or we were uneducated about a certain situation, send us an angry email. Feel free. You can email us at thecuriousHopePodcast@gmail.com. Any last words, Channing?
No. I love it. Love the conversation.
Awesome.
I would love to have more conversations with anyone out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. We just really appreciate coming on. Thanks for coming and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. We want to thank you for listening today. Make sure that you share this podcast, that you follow it, that you subscribe to it. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you subscribe and share. And tune in next week, because next week, so we focused more today on global outreach. Next week, we're going to be talking with someone that's from here in the Walla Walla area that's engaged in more local outreach. So that's going to be a surprise guest from the Christian Aid Center.
Ooh.
So very excited about that conversation that I'm privileged to have next week. So make sure you tune in next week. Next Wednesday, we release episodes every single Wednesday. That's all I've got. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.
See ya.